I'm Rita Ledoux. I'm chair of SAPLA, St. Anthony Park Branch Library Association, and I am just thrilled to see all of you here tonight. I'm excited about the program we have. We are hosting John Shepard, who is a longtime friend and neighbor. John is the assistant director at the Center for Global Environmental Education at Hamline University, and in that role he has produced a number of documentaries. Last year we were able to host John with his program called Northern Lights, Starry Skies, which was the story of dark skies, particularly in northern Minnesota, light pollution. That particular piece was also, as this one, produced in coordination with the PBS station in Duluth North, or PBS North. And that program got an Emmy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Environmental and Science Programming. That was a Upper Midwest Emmy. And the one we're going to hear about tonight is up for another Emmy. And I presume it's in the same category. So that's pretty exciting. His new documentary, again produced with PBS North, is called A Sea Change for Lake Superior, the Warming of the World's Largest Lake. And we are excited to welcome John to our stage. I will have a mic at the end. If there are questions, people will be able to ask them. And I also want to, just ahead of time, thank Bianca and Rufo and Benny, the crew from Spin, who are recording this, and it will be available on the SAPLA website in a week or so. Okay.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Great to see all of you here. Let me start by asking a question. Show of hands, how many of you have been swimming in Lake Superior? Oh my God, you're all crazy. Well, no, I won't say that. Anybody been doing it, 20 years ago? Okay. So have you noticed any differences in water temperature or what that experience was like, out of curiosity? Nothing comes to mind? It's warmer? Does it seem warmer? Okay. Well, the subject of our presentation tonight is the warming of Lake Superior. This is, as Rita said, it's an hour-long documentary. It has been broadcast on Twin Cities Public Television. It's also available online. And there are, if you didn't get one, probably everybody did, that postcard we had at the back has the web link to this program and to the other projects we've been working on. So you can watch. I'm not going to play the whole thing tonight. I'm going to play segments of it and then talk a little bit about the project and some of the background information associated with it. So that's kind of a brief introduction. Hopefully this technology will work and I can make it, oh, look at that. So as Rita said, I'm with the Center for Global Environmental Education at Hamline University. We are actually part of the School of Education and Leadership. So we do a lot of, we have a very broad mission, which is listed there, to foster environmental literacy and stewardship in citizens of all ages. Nice, huge vision that, could take you almost everywhere, and it actually takes us a lot of different places. We're very active all around the country, doing a lot of work in the Great Lakes region, but also up and down the Mississippi River. We have a great big project in the Gulf of Mexico, all 5 Gulf states. Doing public education. We develop learning resources and media that educate the public and K-12 audiences. We're also very busy in Hawaii and have worked on the East Coast and West Coast as well. So we're kind of dispersed around the country. But as I say, the Northwoods of Minnesota have been or Lake Superior in particular, have been a focal point. We started our center in 1990 with Will Steger. You may remember, perhaps, in that year he did an expedition across Antarctica. It was the first dog sled expedition across the continent, and first and last, because you can no longer do that, according to the International Antarctic Treaty. So that was kind of a big start, and he had an international team of adventurers from China, the USSR, France, Great Britain, Japan, and the United States. And part of the reason for that whole trip was to raise awareness about the Antarctic Treaty, which was up for reauthorization. There was a possibility it would not pass. They did this, you know, Steger loves doing that kind of stuff. He would have done it anyway, but had a good excuse for doing it, and that was successful. So the treaty was reauthorized. So that was the start of our center. We ran an education program, was developed associated with that expedition. That was in 1990, and we're still at it and have evolved over the years. This project really got its start as we were doing educational work on Lake Superior and got to know these folks up in the upper left-hand corner there. Katya and Mark Gordon live in Two Harbors. They are avid sailors, have sailed their whole lives. They have a charter sailing service on Lake Superior and had been doing sailing trips for many years. We got to know them, and they shared with us that they have been gathering, as citizen scientists, data on the water temperature of Lake Superior for many years. And they were telling us that, yeah, 20 years ago, nobody would have thought of bringing a swimsuit on a day outing sail trip out on the lake. And now it's the lake temperatures, surface temperatures, had become warm enough that they actually encourage people to bring swimsuits. And they've been working with the Large Lakes Observatory at University of Minnesota Duluth, which studies big lakes all around the world, and sharing their data with the Large Lakes Observatory. And so they were the ones to share with us that Lake Superior was now one of the fastest warming lakes in the world. Fabulously frigid Lake Superior, one of the fastest warming lakes in the world. It really got our attention, and I just thought, wow, that, you know, how many people know that? First of all, how many of you have heard that before you came tonight, or is that knowledge you had? Okay. So the word's been getting out, but at that point, it was news to us, and we thought, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for the lake, for its natural systems, for wildlife, for aquatic life? What does it mean for the legacy of this lake? What does it mean for the communities and people whose livelihoods depend on the lake? So that was really the genesis of the project. We thought, let's dive into this and see what we can learn. Let's see. So we decided to tell the story in 3 parts. So the documentary has these 3 segments. Legacy, which is really about, well, what is the legacy of Lake Superior? Fabulously frigid, the lake that does not give up its dead because it's so cold. The world's largest freshwater lake. What is its legacy? What has it, in what ways has it been important to different communities? Then the second section, a sea change, is about the changes that are occurring and looking at the warming of the lake. And then finally, as we like to do, we conclude with a section on stewardship. So, okay, there are some issues here. What are ways people can get involved to have an impact? So that's kind of the structure of the story. And these are we wound up spending a lot of time with a whole variety of people that we wanted to bring different voices and different perspectives into this story. So we interviewed and worked with 9 different scientists to get their perspectives. Anywhere there were fisheries biologists and then physicists, just a whole number of folks. We worked with a couple of artists, both of them Ojibwe artists, and we really wanted to bring an Ojibwe voice, prominent Ojibwe voices into this story. And in addition to the 2 artists, we also worked pretty closely with the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe and a couple of their resource managers who have been, working on natural resource issues were also included. The sailors I mentioned, Mark and Katya Gordon. The fisheries folks there, that's a commercial fisherman, really interesting guy, Stephen Dahl. He's, for 30 years, has been fishing primarily for herring out of Knife River, and really interesting guy, interesting stories to tell. resource managers, that's Wayne Dupuy, he's with the Fond du Lac Band, and then young people, and that they show up in the final segment. So lots of voices, and it's really it's an hour-long program, but it's really a series of vignettes and shorter pieces. So you'll hear some of these stories. So I'm going to share a number of clips from the film. The first one is the opening sequence. The other thing, because you'll see there's this swimming event that is part of the story, and that was actually the brainchild of the director of our center, and whose name is Tracy Fredine, and a friend of his who's a long-distance swimmer. And Tracy had the idea of, well, we should organize a swimming event and film it and capture what it's like to really be in that, immersed in Lake Superior's waters. So as you'll see, you'll meet some of those folks. So I will kick it off and we'll start rolling the first story.
There's always something new to see in Lake Superior. Just swimming at a new beach or going a little bit further down the beach in my training and seeing what's around that next corner. I can find myself pretty far away from my towel before I'll turn around. I'm Karen Zemlin. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I started swimming in open water with my dad when I was 14, and we did a lot of swims together. We started swimming in Lake Superior when he was training to swim in the English Channel. You have to train your body and your mind for open water, cold water swimming. We're lucky to have such a big body of water for open water swimmers to train in.
Karen and a team of 5 seasoned marathon swimmers devised a plan to attempt a distance record relay swim for Lake Superior in late August 2023. Their idea was to swim nonstop without wetsuits from Split Rock Lighthouse to Duluth. The swimmers would swim 1-hour rotations over the 46 miles. When not in the water, they would rest and warm up aboard the 68-foot Soulmates 2. The 36-foot Imagine would lead the way with Paul Vogue in his kayak as a safety escort. In preparation, they held a practice session in July.
For today, our goal is to swim that shape of a box, so there's 3 GPS coordinates.
On the team with Karen was 62-year-old Jeff Everett, 64-year-old Craig Collins, 51-year-old Casey McGrath, 28-year-old Seth Batesold, and 57-year-old Mike Miller.
We're no spring chickens here, except Seth.
So they come with a lot of experience of their own, and we're going to lean into that.
Super toasty in this wetsuit.
On practice day, wetsuits were allowed, a luxury that the swimmers wouldn't have a month later.
Today is a good proof of concept that this time of year, during this swim window at the end of August, that this is achievable. It's a slow, subtle process, but it's getting warmer. So we're one of those invasive species as the lake warms up, the open water swimmers.
This is the first long relay in Lake Superior. In an event that's over 45 miles, it's substantial because we know how fast those conditions can change.
ready?
Sure am.
Okay, so the day is here. How are you feeling right now?
I'm super excited. I think that the water is a great temperature. I guess I didn't get a read on it. I heard it was maybe 65 even, so that's plenty warm.
Plenty warm.
Plenty warm.
All right.
Any big body of water, you have to invite its cooperation sometimes, I think, because no matter what, it can win.
Okay, well, we got them launched there. And the way we wove that experience into the documentary, this section you just saw is very close to the beginning, and then we go away and tell some other stories, and then we return to them later on in their journey. And I'm not going to tell you how it turned out. You'll have to watch the whole thing if you haven't done that yet. Do they make it? It was pretty dicey, and we really weren't sure if it was going to work, because any number of things could have happened that would have made it unsuccessful. Could have had to have been aborted for various reasons. So we kind of had a whole plan B. If that didn't, because that was filmed in August of 2023, and we needed to have the film done by November, and so we kind of had a plan B. If that just bombed and didn't work at all, we'd have a plan B. So that's all I'll say about that. So then the next segment is from the legacy portion, and it's a little bit kind of places Lake Superior in a broader context internationally.
We live on a blue planet. Though 97% of the Earth's water is salt water, making up the world's oceans, and it's not readily available for our use, only 3% is freshwater, and only a third of that water is accessible. Almost all of the rest is either frozen in glaciers or unreachable below ground. That makes surface fresh water such a precious resource. And among the world's freshwater lakes, Superior's very name suggests how extraordinary it is. It is the largest lake in the world by surface area. It contains 84% of North America's surface freshwater reserves.
Lake Superior is the greatest of the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes watershed holds 20% of all the fresh surface water on the planet, and Lake Superior alone holds 10% of all the fresh surface water on the planet. It has enough volume or capacity to absorb the waters of all the other Great Lakes and still have room to spare. It's truly a superlative, globally significant water body.
The fact that we here in the middle of North America, here in Duluth, Minnesota, can look out our windows and see ships which may have come from really anywhere on Earth is a really remarkable thing.
This is the largest freshwater port in the world, routinely moving goods across the globe, out of the center of the United States to far-flung countries in Europe. They ship to Australia, they ship to parts of Asia. So it's really a remarkable connection for our people, but also to a global economy.
The thing about Lake Superior is it's just loaded with superlatives. It's just so big, so vast, so beautiful. It's the wildest of the Great Lakes. It has the most wilderness-like shorelines, and it is the one lake that people can visit and get a glimmer of what it might have been like to be here pre-European settlement. It is the most intact of the Great Lakes ecosystems that we have here in North America.
So that kind of gives a little bit of context. There are other segments of the legacy portion. that I don't have time to play the whole thing. So now we're going to kind of start moving into the second portion of the documentary that we'll spend more time with. And of course, this is the part about AC change, so beginning to look at the way that the lake is changing.
Lake Superior's unequaled legacy as famously frigid, clear, and clean does have a darker side. Though the lands surrounding the lake remain largely undeveloped and today have few sources of pollution, for 25 years, taconite tailings dumped into the lake by the Reserve Mining Processing Plant in Silver Bay, Minnesota, contaminated Superior's waters. Public opposition and a lawsuit halted the practice in 1980. Ballast water from ocean-going vessels introduced invasive species, such as the sea lamprey, which reduced native fish populations. Solutions were found to reduce those impacts, too. But today the lake faces new challenges. The increasing presence of microplastics, even on the most remote beaches, is one concern. Even greater are the multiple effects of our warming climate. Lake Superior is now one of the fastest warming of the world's largest lakes.
Lake Superior is a remarkably cold lake compared to small lakes around it, but also Lake Superior is significantly colder than the other Great Lakes. It's actually a lot further north and sits in a much colder climate than the other Great Lakes. The other really important aspect is that it's just really deep. And so in the spring, when things are warming up, you have to warm up that entire bulk of the water, and it just takes a very long time. My name is Jay Austin. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I work in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, but also here at the Large Lakes Observatory, which is a group of scientists on campus, all committed to developing a better understanding of how large lakes around the world function. Winter conditions play a huge role in determining what happens the following summer, as much as whether we're having a warm or a cold summer. Basically, since about 1980, we've seen a dramatic increase compared to what happened the previous 80 years. The lakes are 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer now in the summer than they were 40 years ago. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that we are having much milder winters, which means less ice. And again, those winter conditions end up rolling forward into what happens in the summer. And so it's a combination of milder winters and warmer summers that are causing surface temperatures to be measurably and statistically warmer now than they were 40 years ago.
So there are the kind of the basic causes of the warming of the lake, that the conditions in winter make a big difference. The amount of ice cover makes a big difference, as you heard there. So from here we begin to look at what some of the implications of the warming are. And one of them concerns storm events.
What we've seen under climate change is not only is the lake warming, but we're seeing an increase in large storm events. In 2012, we had a 500-year storm event in Duluth, Minnesota. Animals were swimming out of the zoo. You had photos of people in kayaks at ATM machines. It was just an extraordinary storm event that gutted the street system and broke different parts of the sewer system. It was a really extraordinary storm event. Then in 2016, just 4 years later, and 60 miles to the east along the south shore of Lake Superior, we have a 1,000-year storm event that strikes Ashland, Wisconsin. Blew out federal highways, blew out all sorts of culverts and bridges throughout the area. And then 2 years later, 2018, we have another 1,000-year storm event that hammers Ashland, Wisconsin again, and then stretches all the way to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and pounds Houghton, Michigan, Hancock, Michigan. And these storm events created sediment plumes that were so large that they're visible from space. These are storms that are only supposed to happen every 500 years, only supposed to happen every 1,000 years because of their severity. And the south shore of Lake Superior had 3 of them in 6 years. We felt like we were seeing climate change right before our eyes.
So I'm going to march through a couple of the other impacts as related to the warming. This next one has to do with the appearance of algae blooms in Lake Superior.
Algae are these very small organisms that live in water. They're an important function of any food web. However, they can grow in abundance, and that's when you have an algae bloom. So it's when you just have really an explosion of growth. You can see this when you look in, a pond or a lake. You see all this kind of scummy green-looking water. And so algae play an important function, but when they grow in abundance, they can actually become very problematic for the ecosystem. In areas like Western Lake Erie that has a really strong agricultural presence, and it's also a much shallower basin than Lake Superior, you see these really extensive, really intense cyanobacterial blooms. Lake Superior is not where you would typically see cyanobacterial blooms or algal blooms in general. Anybody who's gone and swimming in Lake Superior, even in the hottest months, knows it's still quite cold.
We have been surprised in seeing blue-green algae blooms or cyanobacterial blooms in Lake Superior. The first documented example was 2012.
So following that storm, about 30 or so days afterwards, there was a massive algal bloom that appeared in the lake. And nobody really knew what to make of this. We thought, gosh, that's really crazy. It's kind of a one-off thing. But we weren't thinking this is a problem in Lake Superior. It was probably related to this crazy storm, and that shouldn't be happening again. And then in 2018, once again, we had one of these really, really large flood events, and then we had a cyanobacterial bloom that stretched hundreds and hundreds of meters along the shoreline and went more than a kilometer offshore. And so it seems that this is becoming a more prevalent thing. In years where we have blooms, no matter what the size are, there are warm temperatures for long periods, or essentially like a longer growing season. And in years where you also have these big flood events and more nutrients, that's when you get really big blooms.
We're seeing cyanobacterial blooms in big, beautiful Lake Superior. It's a huge scientific surprise and a mystery.
The mystery is that most Lake Superior algal blooms aren't appearing where scientists expect to see them. The nutrients that feed algal blooms typically come from agricultural and urban runoff, and the South Shore locations where the blooms have been most evident have little of either. Solving the mystery of what's causing Lake Superior's algal blooms has become a priority for scientists with the Environmental Protection Agency.
This is the Lake Explorer 2 that we're on today on our way to Bayfield and the Apostle Islands. We've been interested in Lake Superior with these occasional occurrences of algae blooms along the South Shore. We're trying to be ahead of the curve and really get this baseline data now before maybe future blooms develop. So on the back deck, we'll lower down a device we call a CTD rosette, and it collects water at different depths through the water column. And it has some sensors on board that helps us characterize the plankton community. And we can look at the different types of algae that are there.
Here we have an opportunity to really get at the beginning of a problem in Lake Superior because we are just starting to have blooms. We have fairly clean water. We can kind of look at what's changing along with the change in the frequency of blooms. So the initial hypothesis is it has to do something with rainfall coming off the landscape through the tributaries and out to Lake Superior. Whether it's bringing in the organisms off the landscape, cyanobacteria are all over, they're prevalent. So are these streams bringing those organisms into Lake Superior? Are they bringing in nutrients? Are they bringing in warmer waters? Because as the landscapes warm up, the water coming off of that also warms up. You know, which of these factors could that be?
I'm on board to help with the glider work, and we'll be deploying our autonomous underwater glider probably outside the Flag River near Port Wing, Wisconsin this morning. With the sensors that are on the glider, we can cross-compare what the glider is detecting and what we've sampled from the CTD rosette. It's where the glider really is a useful device. We can put it out for long periods of time. We don't have to have a ship and crew. We can come back at the end of the mission, pick the glider up, go through all the data that's been collected continuously while it's been out. If a bloom occurs, we'll try to fly into it, try to measure the extent of the bloom both horizontally and then vertically with the glider. The glider collects data just about every second, so it's a huge amount of data that we're collecting in this area that help us better understand the conditions that might be leading up to these blooms when they do occur.
So we spent a day with those folks, and that was fascinating, and seeing this technology that they're using and understanding really how challenging the task is to do what they're trying to do. The lake is so vast, and to be able to, they're gathering baseline data, which will then help inform them when algae blooms occur, but to actually happen to have one happen when they're out there, or even when the glider is out on its mission, is one of the challenging things that they face. So we'll look into fisheries next and get to know Stephen Dahl a little bit, the fisherman and fisheries biologists, and some young researchers who are investigating conditions in the winter.
When you step out on a lake in winter, it's dead quiet. The snow is completely decking the entire lake, and you think, okay, if it's quiet up here, it's got to be quiet down there. As more researchers are finding out in the winter, there's actually a lot going on under the ice. All right, let's see what we got. With time, the amount of ice that's on the Great Lakes and the length of time that ice is out is changing. When it's uncovered by ice and snow, you get a lot of sunlight that regulates where the phytoplankton are in the water column, and that kind of structures this food web. So what we're doing in this winter project is collecting samples from different depths in the water column that will be able to tell us where are those phytoplankton sitting and what types of zooplankton are there. You got some copepods in there, some cladocerans. Lots of interesting questions can be answered using these little creatures. With time, the amount of ice that's on the Great Lakes and the length of time that that ice is out is changing. So we're seeing extended ice-free seasons. That could mean big changes in biogeochemical cycling. When the ice is free, when the ice is off and that water is open, how does that change the physics of the lakes? How does that change mixing? That affects all aspects of the lake functioning.
So if you have an ice cover, there's usually some algae growth underneath the ice. Some of those algae cells settle, allow enhanced productivity of invertebrates in the winter that are then available when those fish swim up to feed. So losing ice is kind of a big deal.
The loss of ice cover and warming of the lake have created additional challenges for those whose livelihoods depend on Superior's fisheries.
Cold is beautiful. Uniformly cold water out there, no trouble. The top water gets warm. It'll get up to 60, 65 degrees, and it's 39 degrees down in the bottom. So you get some really weird currents. And quite often, we see it, winds one way and currents another way. So when the net comes up, it'll start spinning on you, or the net will be way out there in front of the bow, and the wind's pushing you back the other way. And frightening sometimes. On the end of each net, I carry large floats. They're about this big. It helps the trollers see it, but also it holds that end up. And when the current hits, you get out there and you realize they're underwater. Say a little prayer, you stay there, net, hold on, go back home. And if it's been blowing northeast for, especially in July and August, when the top water is warm for a while, it's going to be 3 or 4 days before you can get it up. When the water's cold and uniformly cold, you don't get those problems. You don't get the currents. We've had warm water hold on longer in the fall. That warm surface water pushes into October quite a bit. It was 57 degrees surface water pushing November 1st. That's really late. Cold is beautiful.
Lake Superior is unique among the Laurentian Great Lakes in that it's dominated by native species. Most of the other lakes are dominated by invasive species, prey species like alewife, rainbow smelt, huge populations of round goby, and they go along with other invasives like zebra mussels and quagga mussels. So those food webs are so altered by invasive species in the other lakes. The conditions in Lake Superior sort of preserve it. It's really cold, and not a lot of those invasive species can deal with the cold. So this cold water preserve that Lake Superior represents for native species seems to be changing. Now, I don't think we've hit a threshold where they're gonna be able to become hyperabundant consistently, but if climate continues to change as it is, you're gonna see some of these invasive species that are on the edge of their range start to expand and increase, especially in areas like the St. Louis estuary, which not only gets the most ship traffic in the Great Lakes, but we also have plenty of invasive species here in the estuary that potentially could spread to other river mouths and wetland areas as you move up the shorelines. And if warming continues, they'll spread naturally.
So Tom there made a reference to the St. Louis River estuary, and we do a whole segment of the film that talks about the estuary. And you'll be hearing more about that later because we're going to be taking a deeper dive into the St. Louis River estuary and other estuaries for our next project. But that was really, again, another eye-opening experience for us to have a sense of how those fisheries impacts are changing. The other thing I'll mention is that Stephen Dahl was talking about how the warm temperatures are extending into the autumn. And he shared with us that historically 40% of his income as a commercial fisherman was during the autumn herring runs. And so if you have that really warm water extending into the fall, and those currents are really active that make it that much harder for him to have his nets out there, that is a significant problem for him financially. Okay, so then this is our final segment. This is from the stewardship section, and we spent time with Mark and Katya Gordon, the two sailors who I mentioned earlier, and they, in 2014 or so, they started working with young people, and they're environmental educators as well as sailors, and so they have a crew of young people, college-age students that join them for 6 weeks or so in the spring, and they travel and visit communities along Lake Superior shore, all around the lake, traveling in their sailboat, living on the sailboat, and they give presentations to schools and work with schools to do really wonderful environmental education programs about Lake Superior. So this is our concluding segment that I will play now.
When you look at who is going to solve climate change and who is really going to make the difference, it's the young people. The folks who have not ever experienced life without climate change, they're the ones who are going to be solving this.
I mean, it's really hard to live on our boat for weeks at a time and not be changed in some way.
We take on a crew of young adults, college-age kids, and we sail from port to port and we visit different schools.
Who can tell me what an invasive species is? My name is Brandy Chapland and I'm 25. I was interested in doing sea change because I love sailing and because I also am very passionate about the environment. So this seemed like a really good opportunity to kind of tie those two things together.
The crew, you know, they're doing the presentations, they're helping with the cleaning and the cooking and all that kind of stuff and sailing the boat. Okay.
I have a really deep connection with the lake just because I see it's such a powerful being. You know, it's alive. Being able to see it every single day is powerful, and watching it change and watching the weather roll in. See how the waves can pick up so quickly just in an hour. And we've had days where we've had 6-foot waves and you're crashing around and people are getting seasick.
You start pulling deep.
It can be a very scary experience at first.
I have no sailing experience.
All right, Finley, let's go ahead and go around to this side.
To have your house moving all different directions and up and down, and you're feeling nauseous and maybe cold and tired and scared, and it can be a little overwhelming.
Forward. Yep.
But I think having a captain like Mark who's always calm in those situations and really knows what he's doing.
All right, hang on, I'm going to be back in a minute.
Learning how to walk is a really big thing too, and there's lines and winches and kayaks, everything you can imagine on top of the boat. And so when you're out there in high seas and being able to navigate the boat, and that is a really big skill.
All right, we're sailing.
Woo! Having that connection and that closeness, one with the crew and then two with the students, was really powerful.
Thank you all for listening.
We work mainly with 5th and 6th graders and do a lot of education on how climate change, plastic pollution, and aquatic invasive species are affecting Lake Superior. And we really try to focus on what the kids can do in their own lives to make a difference.
We show them a map of Lake Superior and we invite them to commit to some change they're going to make, and if they do, they get to sign the map.
Avoid single use. Avoid single-use plastic. I love it.
Plant more trees. Drive electric cars.
Oh, good.
Never use a single-use water bottle again.
When I no idling cars.
Replant trees. Toss something in the trash. You look at the number. It's like, can I recycle this?
try not to make it too scary because climate change can be a very scary subject for a lot of students, for a lot of young people.
One way we help them to talk about it in a really fun way is to get them on the local radio stations. Each group will either be working on plastics, invasives, or climate change. You write down who's going to say what here, and then when you're ready, we bring a recorder in and we record it, and then we will send it to the radio station at the Two Harbors Community Radio, and they play them just at odd moments during their day on the radio, and they love doing this.
Hello, our names are
Lila,
Dominic,
Daxton, Laura, and Gina.
And today we're going to talk about the climate change on Lake Superior.
We record them doing little 2-minute snippets.
Fires, floods, and drought, as well as invasive species and warmer temperatures, are taking their toll on the forests, and it shows.
Wow.
Do you think that's good?
I think that was great. We record those as podcasts and send them to the Two Harbors Community Radio Station where they play them throughout the summer.
Thanks for listening. This is
Lila,
Dominic,
Daxton, Laura, and Gina
from the North Shore Community School.
Till next time!
I really hope that people can fall in love with Lake Superior and use it as a way to inspire them to do something about climate change.
Aren't those kids great? Just love that part of this, being able to work with them. So that's kind of my walkthrough of our documentary. Again, the web link on the back of that postcard has a link. You can watch the whole thing. It's online, so easy for you to find, and you're welcome to share that. We want as many people to see that as we can. Then I'm going to share with you a little bit, okay, so we got the story told. Well, what's going to happen then? What kind of impact is this going to have? And actually, this documentary is part of this larger initiative that our center is working on. And it's really a broad-based education and stewardship initiative throughout the region. And it involves 6 different elements. So on the far right there is the PBS documentaries. So we've completed 2 so far, and we have 3 more in the works. And then we have created a very rich multimedia learning program that plays on the other 3 elements you see there. So on the left, we have a whole network of these large interactive touchscreen kiosks that are in public locations throughout the region. We have a companion pocket gallery mobile app that's free that has the same content again. And then we've optimized all of that content for K-12 classrooms as well. So those are kind of the media parts of the story. We also do live in-person professional development programs for teachers in the St. Louis River estuary, and we've completed our 2nd one this last summer. We do institutes like that on the Mississippi River and in other locations as well. But those workshops that we do in the estuary are really focused on Lake Superior. So that's number 5. And then the last one is our National Adopt a Storm Drain program. This is the largest program of its type in the country. And you may have seen signs around the neighborhood here, adopt your storm drain. And the idea is for citizens to adopt, or a classroom or a business to adopt a storm drain in front of their house or their school and keep pollutants out of the storm drain, because anything that goes into the storm drain typically just flows untreated into the nearest water body, whether it's Lake Superior or the Mississippi River. So that's kind of a citizen action piece that is built into this. So with and then a little bit more about that, the kiosks, we have 33 of them now. They're in every major state park. There's a whole bunch of them in resorts, the Odyssey resorts up and down the shore, the major museums, they're in coffee houses, they're in brew pubs. We have them in the highway rest areas along I-35 between Duluth and the Twin Cities, and several of them in the Twin Cities as well. And the content there is hours of stories related to the natural and the cultural history and heritage of the Lake Superior region, and it features the our Lake Superior documentary prominently. And this is the kind of the homepage for the K-12 learning program that we have online. And you can see the link on the left there, bottom left, is the entire documentary plays there in segments. So it's being used by schools up and down the shore. The Duluth School District is using this program. So it's making big impacts in schools as well. I mentioned we've done 2 documentaries so far. The first one was on the night sky, and then this one. Altogether, regionally, we've reached well over 600,000 people through these different efforts. Actually, the kiosks themselves have reached 600,000 people in the last 3 years. And then nationally, it's been millions of people. We got really a lot of press coverage on the long-distance swim that we did. It was on Minnesota Public Radio. Star Tribune covered a number of stories, and it eventually was broadcast on let's see, the NPR Saturday Morning Story program that's on with Scott Simon, which has a listenership of over 4 million people on average days. So these are the different ways we've been just trying to get the word out. Also, I mentioned we work closely with a number of tribal groups and individuals. Out of this project has evolved a close working relationship with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. The map shows their reservation. That's the 3, you can see the 3 districts there. That is the boundaries of their reservation. So it's near the city of Cloquet. And then you can see the St. Louis River flows along the eastern side of their reservation and then goes through the St. Louis River estuary and out through the Twin Ports, Superior and Duluth. And this is a learning program we developed collaboratively with the band, and it's designed to teach Ojibwe language. And so we worked with their language and culture program, and they're concerned about having their own band members learn Ojibwe. So we have donated 2 of our kiosks to the band. They have this program playing in some of their public buildings as a way of helping to educate folks about places of importance on the reservation and outside the reservation, and to kind of reinforce language learning. So that's been one of the outgrowths, and in our projects that we have underway now, that's a very close relationship. And then also with Fond du Lac, another project we have underway is going to be looking at wildfires. It's called Rekindled, an Indigenous Wildfire Crew Tribal Wisdom, Fires Fueled by Climate Change. And this project really is looking at how wildfires are increasing in severity with climate change. Although not every year. We noticed this last summer. We actually came up with the idea for this project last winter. You may remember there was hardly any snow. By spring, the forests were very dry, very little moisture, and we anticipated a really significant fire season. And so we started this project, and we have a videographer who lives very close to the reservation who's embedded with the wildfire crew at the Fond du Lac Band. And the idea was to spend time with them, because the Ojibwe historically have had a very different ways of thinking about and managing their forest resources. So they don't talk about fighting fire, they talk about living with fire. And they, historically, going back generations, have used fire as a management tool to create conditions for certain types of vegetation that is important for medicinal purposes and cultural purposes. So they've practiced cultural burning. Well, that has been illegal for many decades as part of the suppression of Ojibwe culture. The official fire management policies that have been in place by the U.S. Forest Service and DNR in Minnesota for many decades have really been about suppressing wildfires, trying to prevent them, which has created this tinderbox conditions of dry material that is just building up. And that's part of the reason why wildfires are so serious nowadays. And then with climate change happening and increasing droughts and so forth, that's just exacerbated. So this documentary, again, an hour-long program, will follow the experiences of this wildfire crew as they fight fires in Minnesota. We were expecting this would all be done by now because we thought there'd be a horrendous wildfire season last summer, which fortunately there wasn't because it rained all spring and summer until August. So this project is going to take a little bit longer to complete. But the videographer we are working with has been spending a lot of time with them. So it's a very interesting opportunity and project with the Fond du Lac Band. This is a brief trailer for the film.
We have to look at this forest the way our ancestors looked at it. We loved and respected it, honored it, and humbled ourselves before it. It has a spirit just like us. I could measure climate change by my overtime. We're getting fires earlier and earlier in the seasons, and this dries out. So I'll feel. They are burning hotter. So many uses for fire the world over by indigenous people. After the treaties were signed, all burning stopped. All fire became bad. That changed everything. It changed the Anishinaabe's culture and his way of looking at the land. We have a reciprocity and a stewardship for our land. We have to love and honor it and take care of it, and it'll take care of us. We got to bring back fire.
So the other project that has grown out of our work with the one that I've been talking mostly about, our Lake Superior Sea Change project, is a second one I mentioned earlier that really looks at estuaries. So an estuary is an area where a river flows into either a large lake or, if it's a coastal, continental coastal area, into saltwater ocean. And they're very important biologically. The mixing of different water, water from the river and the ocean or the lake, different chemical properties, different nutrient levels, and so forth. So they're very, very important biologically, and also they tend to be where people congregate for a number of reasons and where communities develop. So we're going to look at estuaries. In particular, we're going to explore two different ones. This is an aerial image of a part of the St. Louis River estuary. Spirit Lake is the larger body of water, and Spirit Island there. You can see in the top part of the picture, Duluth is up there. This area, particularly Spirit Island, is considered to be a highly sacred site for the Fond du Lac Band. Ties in with mythology and their history as a people. They understand their history as having their band having migrated from the East Coast to this region, led by prophecies, and their ultimate destination was looking for the place where food grows on the water. They arrived at this location. Spirit Lake at that time was a very shallow lake. It's a larger area within this estuary covered with wild rice, and this was their landing place. And Spirit Island is considered to be kind of the center point. So this is really the heart of their homeland, but what's happened over the years is they were essentially removed from this area and were given or negotiated rights to be able to continue to live on the reservation, which is upstream. So they're no longer have direct access and ability to control what's happening in the estuary. And a huge steel plant was built on the shores of Spirit Lake. This is an aerial version of that, or a picture of the steel plants at the top of the picture there. You can see polluted effluent that's just streaming down into the lake. The plant was built, started construction in 1907. It operated for 72 years, and just unchecked pollution just dumped into Spirit Lake, which the Fond du Lac Band considered to be sacred ground. Stopped operating in the 1970s. As I say, started in opened it for the first time in 1909. In 1981, it was declared a Superfund site because of the extent of the pollution there. And this map shows that the blue hatched area is the boundaries of the Superfund site. So a great deal of the lake. You can see where the U.S. Steel plant is in relationship, and Spirit Island is right there. So this is, we're telling this story of the history of Spirit Island and Spirit Lake as kind of one of the key elements of this new documentary. And really asking the question, what does it take to heal lands and waters that have been so badly polluted like that, and especially if they're considered to be sacred ground for an indigenous population? You know, what does it take? And there has been a huge cleanup effort throughout the estuary, and almost more than $1 billion have been spent. And yet that whole process has been very interesting. It's, and in many ways it has made great improvements, and yet from the tribe's perspective, there are things left out of the equation in terms of, you know, really, well, for instance, let's see if I have this. One of the solutions has been where you, and I've thought, I created these images. For them, this area, as they have talked about it, it's sacred ground. So this is a cathedral. If a cathedral were flooded with polluted waters, and the solution was simply to cover it over with sediment, which is what a lot of the solution has been in Spirit Lake, you probably wouldn't think that was an appropriate response to a sacred site being desecrated. And that's pretty much the way our contacts at Fond du Lac talk about this. There are still 30% or so of polluted sediments that are still in the bottom of the lake that have been covered up with cleaner sediments. And for them, that's inappropriate. So we're just kind of looking at those issues, like so here you have this history of industrial society coming into this area, and how do you make it right? And who should be deciding what the solution should be, and what should the standards be? And then, so moving forward, we're also going to be working with the band. They are working to establish a cultural heritage corridor in the estuary. There are dozens of cultural sites within the estuary. Presently, there's no real protection of them into the future. So their plan is to get them registered with the National Register of Historic Places. So we're going to be working with them to document the stories of these sites and why they're important, and so they can use that information in their proposal to the National Register of Historic Places. And then we'll be developing videos of a number of those sites that they want to share more publicly, and those will be integrated into our kiosk system. The other estuary where we're looking at is the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin near Ashland. This is another band of Ojibwe, and the significant areas include the bottom rectangle there is a large estuary complex that is on the reservation. It's been managed by the reservation throughout time. And then Long Island is a barrier island that is important nesting grounds for endangered bird species. And then there's a fish camp on Madeline Island. And altogether, the former chairman of the tribe, who we've been working with, talks about this as the greatest convergence of diverse habitats in Lake Superior. So incredibly pristine. The wetlands themselves, the Cagagan and Bad River sloughs, are recognized internationally for their pristine quality. And again, they've been managed by the tribe throughout time, in contrast to the history of the St. Louis River estuary. They contain 48% of the Great Lakes wild rice beds. So we did a lot of filming this fall of their wild rice harvest. Also happens there's an oil pipeline that was installed in 1953, the Enbridge Line 5, that runs right through the reservation. It goes underneath several waterways that feed into this wetland system. This is a section of pipe that has been exposed through erosion, and the band is doing everything they can to try and get the pipe rerouted around the reservation, although current plans call for it to still be within the watershed. It would be outside of the reservation boundaries, but if there were leaks and so forth, the waterways would be threatened. So we're going to be looking at that whole question as well. And this is an area where there's this bend in one of the rivers that feeds into the estuary, where the expectation is pretty soon the river will cut through that narrow area and will expose the pipe. And so there's a lot of concern there. And in this project, we're going to be working with a group of mostly indigenous young people who are learning to be underwater photographers with a nonprofit organization in that area, and kind of we're weaving that story into the whole process. So with that, I am going to stop talking. I will invite you, if any of you are inspired to help this effort, we are actually raising funds to help pay for these upcoming documentaries. That's a big QR code that leads to an online contribution website we have, and any contribution is more than welcome. I do have some of these lovely mugs that are made by an Ojibwe artist that we're working with, and happy to give one of those to you if, for any donations over $100. And you can, if you want to do that, you can just let me know after we're done. And I'll stop talking now and be happy to take some questions or welcome your comments and let me know what you learned. We'll go from there.